Good morning, everyone, and happy Tuesday. I'm here to talk about the importance of transitional sessions. Now, what I mean by that is the change of a season, the change in their environment, the change to their schedule, anything like that. And I find that a lot of people don't realize how important these periods are, and we do in people, usually because September marks the beginning of back to school, and it's a change in schedule and a change in season at the same time. A lot of kids get sick around this time because the immune system is depressed, because there's so many kids in one area that have all been in different places, and everybody gets sick. It's usually how it goes. But I was going to originally do this just about acupressure and transitional sessions, because in traditional Chinese medicine, there's specific, characteristics of each of the 5 elements, and each one represents a season. So when you transition between elements, there's a lot of other changes going on. But then I got making a list of all the things to talk about, and there's a lot more. So I'm just going to go in general with the therapies. But the energetics of the seasonal changes, now this is my small animal meridians and specific conditions from Tallgrass, but they have a correspondence chart in here. And one of the lines is season. And we just passed between the earth season of late summer and the metal season of fall. And that means that metal is now at its strongest, but this is also when the issues for this element show up, which is grief and wind problems, which is nervousness, seizures, shaking, neurological issues, a lot of sniffling because its orifice is the nose. Body and skin hair. So the skin in traditional Chinese medicine is the second immune system. It's the first defense against external pathogens, but you have an internal immune system and your skin is your external immune system. So if your skin is weakened, you're more likely to get sick, you're more likely to get colds, flus, rashes, things like that. And the meridians are the lung and the large intestine. Well, the kids are adjusting to new seasons. Pets are adjusting to new schedules where maybe they get fed before school and after school instead of 9 and 5 or something. But everybody's intestinal system has to adjust too. So this is a lot of energetic changes, and every season it does change. But some organs are especially weak or strong, and the polar opposites have to be considered too, so that's something to look into. Environmental. Now when I say environmental, I'm talking about animals being rehomed. I'm talking about them being kenneled because somebody goes on vacation, or them coming on the vacation with you. For a lot of animals, that can be really stressful. And for horses that get left in the barn when you're not there to ride them, that can be a little distressing too. If a kid goes to college, now this was about a month ago now, when the kids started going back to college and university. But I've had several people tell me that their dogs or cats were sad and lethargic, and they stopped eating when their kids went to school because they grew up with those kids, right? The kids grew up with the animal, and all of a sudden now the kid's not there. Their whole life they've known that the animal's there, and they just disappear. And a lot of animals hold grief about that, but they also hold guilt and a lot of questions. So the same way that we have when we're kids and somebody disappears, it's, was it my fault? Did I do something? That kind of thing. But I remember I talked about this with explaining to your kids what happens when your pet dies and how the kids hold on to that. They think it's their fault or that they did something. But animals hold on to that too. And a lot of them, flower essence can make a huge, huge difference for stuff like that, especially if you have a multi-pet household where they're all feeling the same thing, or one of your pets dies and your other pet is grieving and stops eating and doesn't want to go outside because depressed like. We don't say, a lot of people don't say that animals exhibit specific emotions, so they say it's like a human emotion. If somebody gets a new job and they're spending less time at home, or their schedule changes and they don't have as much time to spend with the pet, if the animal gets injured and can't go for walks or has to be on stall rest or barn rest, that kind of thing, it's a big adjustment for them. Animals like routine. So if something throws off their routine, they get very upset and frustrated, and it can cause a lot of changes in behavioral changes in your pet that you may take a little bit to notice or not know what to do about, and that's why I'm here. Moving or renovations. Now I have a flower essence client who has, I always get this confused, she either has 2 bunnies and a cat or 2 cats and a bunny, and she was renovating her house. Now she's a client of my mom's, and she's very, I'm going to say, energetically informed, because some of my mom's clients are more that way. And she knew that the renovation was going to start, and it was going to be several months. So she asked me to make some essences for her bunnies and cats. And I did, and they are doing great with the renovations. They're not too bothered by it. They get their outside playtime, and no problem so far, which is really nice to see, because a lot of them, if it's a dog, they usually get either threatened that somebody's in their space and tearing it down, or they hide because of all the noise and things like that. And being in the house entirely is stressful for them, and since that's their main environment, that can have a very serious effect on their mental health. Illness within a hospital. So if someone in their family gets injured and they're in the hospital for long periods of time, then the other family members are going to visit them, and the animals get left at home quite a bit, because obviously they're not allowed in the hospital. But making sure that someone still checks in on the animals and, takes them out and changes their litter box, that kind of thing, because if they're used to being a priority and all of a sudden they're not, in an emergency situation, obviously things have to be done, but that doesn't mean that they deserve to be forgotten. Loss. Loss is a big one, especially if they see that other animal or person every day. And I've seen animals go through this quite a bit, and it's very hard to watch. They either completely stop eating, you can't get any kind of reaction out of them, they don't want to play, they don't want to go out, they don't want to be ridden, they're just not having it anymore. Flower essences are a big thing for that, because they direct the negative energetic imbalances and help to move it back up to the positive version of that emotion. So if you're feeling grief, the flower essences help bring you back up to a neutral state, and then they can then help you move through those emotions more easily, especially because nobody knows if animals process or how long they take to process emotions relative to humans, but just something to consider. Acupressure is obviously a really big thing for transitional periods. One of my earlier acupressure clients, her horse had a best friend, lived with him his whole life. When they changed farms, he changed farms with them, and one day he died. And I think it was from something really sudden like colic. And her horse became lethargic. He wouldn't eat. You couldn't get him to go for a ride. He had no enthusiasm, and he wouldn't interact with the rest of the horses in the herd. And this became an issue because he started losing weight, and she was having a hard time watching it. And again, she's someone who is more energetically inclined, and she called me. I went out to see him. The first session, I immediately picked up on it, because his 2 metal association points, which are the ones along the spine, which are lung and large intestine, they were both so sunken, I didn't even have to put any pressure in my finger, and it would go down. So before she even told me what was happening, because sometimes I specifically ask not to be told so that I can get my sense first and then see if I'm on the right track by asking the owner the history. Some people prefer that, some people like to know right away. But I worked on some lung, large intestine points for him, and he immediately perked up. When we were done the session, we were right beside his stall. He walked into his stall and immediately started eating. That was the first time he had showed any enthusiasm for eating in probably about a week. She had me back again, I think it was about a week and a half later, and we did a second one. And the association points are feeling a lot better, but not where I would like them to be. So we did another session. The points were slightly different, and when he was done, they went for a ride. He did much better, and he went out to play with his herd mates after. Hasn't had a problem since, and it's amazing to see because he's a completely different horse, right? It's like if a human goes through a tragedy, and when they finally move through all those things, they're back to their old self. And it's really amazing to see, but one of the key things about transitional periods is that our emotions matter too, because they pick up on what we feel. I'm going to do another live video about how to focus your energy and emotions when things happen and when you work with animals, because I find that's a big issue for a lot of people. When I do sessions on people, I have to leave my baggage at the door. Because if I come in with all my stuff and I'm thinking about errands I have to do or people I have to call or this person that really upset me, then I'm not being present, and I need to think about what energy I'm communicating to that animal, because I want them to be relaxed and calm and feel grounded and safe and all these things. But if I'm not that way and that's not what I'm projecting, then that's not what they're getting, and that's really important. But last thing, communicating with your animal when things change is really important. So if you know that you're going to be moving and you don't have to be energetically inclined to do this, you can just talk to them, kind of reason with them a little bit, say, okay, I know you like this home, but we're going to be moving to a new home, and you're going to have all the space that you need, and you're going to have toys and walks, and everything's going to be the same. We're just going to be in a different house. And just explain it to them in a way that they are excited about it, because then they'll feel, I want to say their energy won't be depressed when they move, and it'll be easier for them to adjust to the new environment, so you can focus on unpacking and redecorating and things like that, rather than stressing so much about your pet that all of a sudden can't go to the bathroom because he can't find his litter box. You have to show them sometimes. So, okay, this is your spot, this is where your new bed is, this is where you go in the backyard, this kind of thing. But transitional periods are really important, especially if there's a death. Talking to them is really important. Think about what energy you're projecting. I reread Energy Healing for Animals, which is one of my favorite reference books now. And she talks about how if you had a bad day at work and you're frustrated because your boss did XYZ, and then you drop something on the way home and it broke, you walk in the door and you're soaking wet because it was raining outside and you're in a really bad mood, and you walk into the house, immediately your animals pick up on that, and they either run from you because they don't like it, or they run up to you saying, why do you feel this way? Here, let me help. But ultimately, you're responsible for the energy that you bring into the space, because the animals only have one space, and that's where you live. So think about the kind of energy you have in your house and talk to them during transitional periods, because it's really, really important. If you're curious about how acupressure and flower essences work during transitional periods, feel free to send me a message. They're wonderful tools, and I love working with them for transitional periods because usually the reaction is immediate, and that's really wonderful to see. That's all I have to say for today. Tune in next week. I don't remember what the topic is about, but I'm sure it'll be interesting. See you next week.